Thank you. Yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks, Brian. We are kicking off, well, this afternoon continues with this panel discussion that I've put together. I am Dan Stanton, the founder and editor of Bioprocess Insider, and we're going to take a look at the capacity challenge, how single use is feeding the demand for commercial biologics manufacturing. Now, it is well documented that industry has adopted single-use bioreactors and bioprocessing equipment throughout the clinical manufacture of biologics drugs. But where do we stand when it comes to commercial production? Has the ease of use and flexibility of such systems helped solve industry's forecasting issues, for example? Are the size limits, safety issues and unit costs of single-use still obstacles in the full implementation in their use within large-scale manufacture? And what about new modalities? Will single-use be the answer to industry's questions? How will we use them to make the next generation of therapeutics? So I'm going to let the panel speak and introduce themselves. So if we could just go along from one end to the other, and if you could just explain who you are and which company you represent, and also for those that are representing a CMO, if you can give us a very brief overview of the capacity that you offer and whether it's stainless steel or single use. I think that would be a good start to this discussion.
Hi, I'm Steve Hager, Senior Director of Technical...
A bit closer.
Okay. Senior Director of Technical Sales Support for Catalent Biologics. So I represent our drug substance manufacturing. We have two sites, one in Madison, Wisconsin. That site is exclusively single use, and we have currently 3 GMP manufacturing trains with a scale of 250 up to 4,000 liters, so 2 by 2,000 liters. And then our Bloomington facility has a 250-liter single-use reactor, a 600-liter stainless steel, and 2 2,500-liter stainless steel reactors.
Thanks, Steve.
Hi, I'm Shiva Kalafour. I'm Head of Commercial Development at Lonza Pharma Biotech. As you probably know, Lonza is a CDMO, and in the past few years we have invested quite heavily in single-use technology. In fact, 5 of our recent investments involved single-use, and for us single-use is around the scale of 1,000 liter and 2,000 liter scale. And that is being fully integrated into our 12 biologics sites, which are across the world. And our recent announcement is that we are expanding in China as well, and that utilizes the single-use technology as well.
Thanks, Shiva.
Yeah, this is Jay Chen. I actually heading the CMC management on the US side, and I'm representing WuXi Biologics. So WuXi Biologics is exclusively use the single-use technologies for the manufacturing, and we have about 12 sites, either in already operation or under constructions. So currently the 4 has been used. Have all used the 2,000 liter, and we also, the new ones already start operation with the 4,000 liter single use. So we have multiple 2,000 liter and 4,000 liters with the scale out strategies to fill in over 100,000 liter capacities in the single use technology. So, and also we the sites include in China, Singapore, US, and Ireland.
Thanks, Jay.
Good afternoon. My name is Gene Yoshioka. I'm the Senior Director of Manufacturing for Avid Bioservices. Avid Bioservices is a CDMO that has been producing commercial materials since 2005. We have 2 facilities. One is focused on both stainless steel and single-use bioreactors from 100-liter to 1,000-liter scale. And our new facility, which was commissioned in 2016, is focused on single-use technology ranging from 200-liter to 2,000-liter scale.
Thanks, Jay.
Good afternoon. My name is John Gottschalk. I work for Biologics Consulting, and I'm a former FDA inspector, and so I run around the world and help companies improve their quality compliance and also help them navigate the FDA. And I've been consulting for about 14 years now, and we have many clients using single-use technologies, including mixers and bioreactors and all kinds of things. And so I'm happy to be with you today and try to answer some of your questions.
Thank you very much. So, I mean, single use, it's a hardy perennial when it comes to the topics that we discuss throughout the industry, and specifically on the BPI Theater stage. I think it's popped up and featured over the past decade or so here. I'm going to ask John first of all, because I guess he's not given a CMO perspective. But where do we stand as an industry as far as single-use technologies in producing commercial products? Have we reached the level where we're producing commercial batches only by single-use, or are we not quite there yet?
Yeah, it's a very good question because, in my opinion, traditionally we've used single-use more for the clinical trial. Pay no attention to the hum. We're just going to try and
sort this feedback out.
So, in the past, we have used it mainly for clinical trial phase production, but yes, I have seen it in the industry that there are several manufacturers that shall go nameless that are using it for full production, and it absolutely is possible. It is being done, and it is definitely in competition with stainless steel, and they feel that it's much easier and simpler because there's no cleaning validation, for example. Of course, you still do have the concerns of extractables and leachables, but we are there. We are there. I think it's particularly good for perhaps things like vaccines where you only need a tiny amount, or maybe for cell and gene therapy. In gene therapy, if you just need a very small amount of the drug substance, it's perhaps more applicable in that case.
So really it is being implemented, but it's really still limited by size, I guess, or the amount of a drug substance that you need, yeah?
Somewhat. I mean, it's an engineering. You have to apply the engineering and make sure that it's going to work for you at scale, but it absolutely is being used.
Jean, I saw your head nodding while John was talking there. From a CMO perspective, or from your perspective, how do you see? How are you seeing single use being implemented in commercial manufacturing?
Hello. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. So from a CDMO perspective, we've seen a huge uptick in requests for single use technology throughout the process. We've actually gone through 6 PPQ campaigns since the commissioning of our new facility. So single use in commercial manufacturing is coming up. So definitely that's really where the future of the industry is going towards.
Jay, as you said in your introduction, you are solely working with single use. So I'm imagining if you don't have clients who are using single use now for commercial manufacturing, you will do in the future as you build out your capabilities. Is that the case?
Hello? Yeah. I think we already have a single use for commercial products. And several our clients, this is also CDMOs, WuXi Biologics, believe the single use will be the future of the biomanufacturing, include the commercial manufacturing. So in the commercial manufacturing, we use a scale out. We already finished this strategy for several projects for the process validations. It's in the filing right now. And I think we also have a process already approved in the single use for the marketing, use of single use technologies. And I think through the, you can see the perspective from the two separate ones. One is the demanding from the market. Actually, for the biologics therapeutics, varies diverse recent years from 2,000 liter all the way to the 10K to 20K scales. And for the larger scales, with the single use right now, not only matured with the 2,000 liter, at the 4,000 liter is right on the bed. We already have the manufactured GMP facility with the single use 4,000 liter is on the run. So with the 4,000 liter scale at the single use, with the scale out strategies, with a couple of 4,000, you can easily replace with the stainless steel scales.
So in the 4,000 litres is obviously the upper limit of single use. But Shiva, for example, at Lonza, you mentioned you're running at a 1,000, 2,000 litre scale. Are you finding, or are your customers finding, that's a large enough scale to produce commercially at the moment?
Yeah. So single-use technology is, I think it's got a place, particularly for commercial manufacture of niche products. It really depends on the amount of product per year. We don't see it as either or. We believe that it's really relevant to the type of product and the product demand per year. There is a point that it may not make sense to be in single use or even doing multiplexing. And it makes more sense to move on to larger scale in the stainless steel, which is part of the reason that, of course, we've invested in a mid-scale stainless steel as well, because there is a tipping point. There is the economics work up to a point, and then after that, based on product demand, that it does change. So there is place for both. It's really a toolbox of having the network of different types of reactors, modalities, and different sizes, and having a network to be able to meet all the demands.
Stephen, as you said in your introduction, you are predominantly single use. I think there's some stainless steel left over from one of your acquisitions, but how are you managing that tipping point, as Shiva was saying, about customers' need to manufacture commercially and the limitations of single use?
Sure. Currently, as I said, we have one suite with 2 by 2,000 liters. We designed that suite so we can actually roll in a third 2,000 liter if necessary. And then our Madison site is currently building out 2 additional suites, and those will probably be 2 by 2,000 or 3 by 2,000. So we're anticipating the needs of our current and projected clients. Most of the projects are suitable for the 2,000 to 6,000 liter scale.
Yeah. I just want to add one point is because also bioprocessing technology has been increased. The titer has been, the norms of the titer start from 1 to 2, now is 3 to 5. And also with the extensive, intensive cultures, we have been able to get 10 or 50 recently from the WuXi's technology. So with you can use much smaller bioreactor, produce the same amount of a large stainless steel.
That's a really interesting point about the titers, as you say. I mean, would anyone on the panel want to take this? But would commercial manufacturing have been possible with the sort of titers we saw 10, even 5 years ago?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that 2,000 liter scale would be appropriate with lower titers from previous years. But again, we use both our GPEX cell lines as well as transfer in client cell lines. And with our GPEX cell lines, we can get up to 7+ grams per liter. So that really helps in terms of the maximum scale for the bioreactor.
I'm going to address this question now before we run out of time, because it's what everyone kind of wants to hear at the end of the day. We're talking costs. What sort of cost implications does manufacturing commercially in single use have in comparison with manufacturing traditionally in stainless steel? John, once again, the unbiased member of the panel here. Then, what are your feelings about cost?
Well, it's a good question. I'm not sure I can fully answer it because FDA doesn't care how much it costs. So we just wanted to have a good quality, which is what we would say when I worked at FDA. But not being at FDA anymore and being in industry, cost is certainly a concern. I've heard that it's not an issue. So my clients that are using single use say that they can make it work. But I'm not a finance and cost guy. But I'm told that the cost is certainly in line with stainless steel, if not cheaper. Of course, it depends on the scale. So I have limited information. But my information is it's looking good.
Jean or Shiva, you both have single-use and stainless steel, so I think it'd be good to come in here.
As I mentioned earlier, I think that it really is dependent on the product and the process. So it depends on the annual demand of the product, where the economy works, which way. There's no doubt that single use has lowered the barrier of entry. It has allowed to a lot of the companies and products come to the market that are on the smaller side of the annual demand. But it's also, it's more than the cost that one has to consider is about the security of supply, all the raw materials and all that, and balance it with some of the studies that one has to do sort of in terms of the leachables, extractables, the particulates in films, and to what extent can you push the single use at this stage, which one could argue is still relatively young technology. How much can you scale up? Are the bags be able to take it? So I think there's still a lot that the industry can work on and be able to develop it further.
And Jean?
Yeah, so definitely from an operational perspective, the cost goes down because you're not spending energy on validation, CIP, requalifications, maintenance. So really the cost kind of shifts towards raw materials, and that's where our focus has been on in standardizing bag designs, assemblies, because that can, purchasing those in bulk can reduce the cost of the raw materials. So that's really where the focus is on disposable systems.
Just a quick comment on scale up versus scale out. I think you said scale up. So I think that's a good comment to keep in mind, because when we're talking about cost, we do have a per unit cost that goes down typically as we buy more and more. So if we can scale out versus scale up, that might help us with the unit cost. And also security of supply is, I heard that mentioned as well, also very important. It's hard to have just one supplier when you're doing single use, because then you kind of are concerned about that.
So it's kind of economies of scale, really.
Just mentioning about economies of scale are certainly applicable.
Stephen, how do your customers? Is cost even an issue in single use now?
Typically, cost of consumables can be a discussion item, but our typical clients are more focused on the cost of the capture resin, for example, for antibodies. That's definitely a much bigger component. The other cost that isn't necessarily a partner's cost is the cost to the facility in terms of warehousing of all of the bags and other supplies necessary for single use. So in Madison, we're actually putting in a separate warehouse just to handle the increased demand for storage from the new suites.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt. Is there anything we can do about the feedback? Just if the panel turn their mics off, sound people? No? Yeah, I'm just sorry. If we could just turn the mics off when you're not speaking. Sorry, I think it will probably be a lot more interesting if we don't have that buzz going off in the background. That sounds better. So I want to pick up on something that Shiva just mentioned, actually, about single use lowering the barriers of entry. If we kind of look at this from the CDMO industry perspective, I mean, Catalent obviously has upped its game in biomanufacturing through single use. WuXi has gone from having zero bioreactor capacity essentially to having hundreds of thousands of litres, or it will do, through single use. How much has single use helped grow the contract manufacturing space? I'm not sure who wants to come in there. But maybe Jay, as I said, WuXi's growth chart has been really instigated through single use. So.
Yeah, I think this is tremendous with the single use to facilitate increase the facility in a very short time period and with much less capital, investment. So that's for sure. I think especially for the developing countries, for the all the spread globally, I think single use help tremendously to increase the capacity, help the biologics commercializing in all sorts of different areas besides the US and Europe. I think the single-use technology, since introduced, has also been advanced over the years very quickly. So in order for CMO to have to be keep that pace with the new technology improvements, I think it's very important because in the developing countries, the single use is low cost to start with for the commercialization, easy to use, and also much better microbial controls in the beginning. So a lot of advantage with the scale out for the flexibility for the facility. It helps to grow biologics drugs to globalizations.
Stephen, do you think Catalent would have got to the where it is today in biologics if it wasn't for single use?
No, I don't think they would have. It's allowed us to really match the demand for our clients as they grow from early phase 1 to moving into phase 3. We can match the scale that they need, and I think single use has really catapulted us into the biomanufacturing space.
Yeah, so it definitely affords you the flexibility and speed to increase or decrease your capacity. Historically, facilities with large stainless steel reactors were purpose-built for a specific molecule, specific process. Nowadays, you can use the reactor, the single-use reactor for any process. It gives you that flexibility.
And Shiva, you obviously mentioned the barriers of entry earlier, but for Lonza, a long-standing CDMO in this space, probably one of the first, if not the first, is single-use. Has single-use been viewed as an instigator of competition for some of your business?
I think it's fair to say that because the barriers to entry have been lowered, there are many more smaller CDMOs now entering the market because of this, allowing people to enter the market, which is really for the industry is not a bad thing. It's quite healthy to have competition. Ultimately, will benefit our customers and ultimately the patients. So we certainly don't view it as a negative. We believe in it, obviously, but we do believe it has a place, and stainless steel and the mid-scale also has its own place. We think that it's a good movement for the whole industry.
John, in the politest possible way, you've been around the block a bit. How have you seen the CDMO space change? Are there more players because outsourcing is more of a common thing for pharma companies to do, or is single use really a pusher here?
Yeah, I think it's in the mix. Of course, it's just my opinion, but
we value your opinion.
Yeah. So I think from a regulatory perspective, the regulators I think are more used to it now to have a virtual company. It's a big advantage, I think, in terms of capital costs. You don't have to do everything yourself. You can partner with CDMOs, and that works really well. And I think the single use is just part of that. I think it's part of that mix. I think it was partly a driver, not the only driver, because the business itself has gotten bigger, of course, over time. But I do see it as one of the drivers, yes.
I mean, at the same time, obviously we are focusing on single use here, but there have been quite a few CMOs who have either re-entered the space in stainless steel. Some big deals have gone down, and some big investments have been made in large-scale stainless steel facilities by a few CMOs. I mean, what was everyone's thought about where stainless steel lies, especially now that the blockbuster is not what it used to be? Is stainless steel? Are we going to see more investments there, or is it really kind of the capacity is there? It will be used, but the single use is the way forward here. Whoever wants to go.
Yeah, I think we'll primarily focus on single-use technologies. Certainly, stainless steel has a role for the products that the previous speaker was talking about, where you have demands in metric tons. You're not going to necessarily be able to meet those demands with a typical single-use system.
I think about the plasma industry, and some of those folks are here, those companies, and you just can't do it. I don't think. I think it would be very difficult to make something like plasma, where you have 1 million plasma units a week, or sometimes even a day, going through the process. So I think for the really large biotechnology and biologics, it's going to be tough. But again, for something where you don't need too much drug substance, like you can use just a little bit, and that little bit is effective. Again, I think of gene therapy as a model. I think it's here to stay.
It's here to stay.
Yeah.
And while it's here to stay, I mean, we aren't saying that stainless steel is going away, though. Gene, for example, you have both capabilities. Just wondering, sort of, if you give us a brief insight on how the demand is split amongst your customers. Are you seeing more and more demand for your single use rather than your stainless steel, or is it still, you're both sides are getting utilized?
Yeah, so currently our stainless steel reactors are primarily for existing commercial products that we produce, so legacy products. Though even those are, some of them are transferring over to single use, and a majority of the requests that we're getting now are for single use technology. So really, I think that's the direction the industry is heading towards. We see very few requests for stainless steel reactors, except in cases where they have companies maybe acquired a legacy process, and I think in those cases they still want to look at stainless steel reactors.
Yeah, I mean, we're not seeing commercialized products that have been commercialized in stainless steel for the past 5-10 years. We're not seeing any examples of them wanting to move or needing to move into single use, are we? Or maybe we are, but.
And usually if there is a client that is looking at stainless steel reactors for their process, they're looking at it for a short-term supply with eventual movement into the single-use bioreactors.
John, would there be any regulatory reason why a commercialized product or a company would want to move into single use, or be required to move into single use if they're manufacturing stainless steel?
No, there's no requirement. It's a choice. It's a choice that each company can make based upon their experience and what they need from an engineering standpoint. But I'm curious about what you were talking about, Gene. Are you talking about monoclonals mainly? Monoclonal antibodies?
No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
okay.
in the cases where we do have commercial stainless steel processes, those were being scaled up to a larger volume.
Okay. Yeah. So no, what I've seen in the industry is both are used, and there's no regulatory hurdle that I'm aware of, or even preference.
Right. Shiva, I don't know if you've seen at Lonza any examples of a commercial product being transferred from one type of technology to another.
Well, we've certainly got a lot of experience of transfer from one one technology to the other. The critical part is obviously the process and the robustness of the process, and how that you really know the process inside out, so you are able to make that transfer one way or the other. We tend to see a lot of clients who start and want to first entry into market with the smaller scale, which single use, and then as the product demand changes and it needs more and they broaden their indications, then they go into, and they will move on to either mid-scale, which, as I mentioned before, which is why we feel that there is a place for it, and then subsequently to larger scale. So it's kind of springboard for a lot of clients, particularly the smaller biotechnology companies.
And Jay, I'm wondering on this, while we're still talking about stainless steel, could you envisage any reason or any example in the future where WuXi Biologics might change its strategy and invest or expand into building a stainless steel plant? Or is it simply off the cards?
So at least at this moment, we believe single use would be probably be able to apply for majority of the biologics demands. So at a certain period of time, I think stainless steel and the single use will be in parallel, because there is still a lot of demand from legacy product, and also the blockbuster, when the single use still advancing. But as the tighter productivity increase to a certain degree, and the demand even for blockbuster for the bioreactor size will be reduced. So at that moment, I think the single use might be have either completely or mostly replaced, for the stainless steel technologies. But at this moment, I think for WuXi Biologics, we are hoping to focus on the new generation of the technology and moving forward.
And really pushing single use, as you say, it's being supported by higher titers, I guess also the difference in the new modalities coming through. Like we've generally been speaking about monoclonal antibodies. We have spoken about a couple of other modalities briefly, but for cell and gene therapies or for bispecific antibodies, really is single use, in your opinions, I guess, the best way to support these sorts of therapies coming through? Now, Stephen?
Yes, I think for especially bispecifics, single use will work well. They may have, the cell lines may express at a lower level, but they typically can have higher effectiveness. And so you end up maybe not needing as much of the bispecific.
What about, obviously Catalent has recently bought Paragon, the gene therapy manufacturer. I'm not particularly au fait with the production at Paragon, but I would assume it would be single use, would it not?
I believe so. Since the acquisition just closed about a week ago, I'm still educating myself on Paragon, but yeah, I believe so.
Okay, well, Shiva, Lonza has a large cell gene therapy unit as well. Is single use an instigator of cell and gene therapies?
Well, it's obviously something that we considered, and it is part of the whole production flow in our cell and gene therapy. Again, that's a more of a younger, generally, modality as well. So anything that would help, lowering the barriers and being able to get to the market and to the clinic, it's something that, or any innovative ways of doing that. As a company, we're certainly interested, and we follow up that line and find the most suitable applicability for it.
Has anyone else got any thoughts about the sort of the emerging therapies that are coming through, and how single use may or may not support them? Yes, no. Jay, at WuXi, you're moving into the vaccine space, for example. I know it's not an emerging therapy, but for recombinant vaccines, is single use a driver in production there?
Yes, we think that especially for the vaccine areas, I think the infectious disease or things like that, it's good to contain in the single use. Definitely have a lot of advantage. Again, I think single use also have its own challenges, just like our other panelists has been elaborated. I think how that extractable leachable react to different cells is still some cells will be definitely more sensitive to the others. There will be, together with working with the vendors in the life tech technology space is very important. We are closely working with Thermo, GE's, Sartorius, anything we find, and they are very actually innovative at the same time. So I think we cannot achieve the the goals without their help. So I think they are also helping us to lower the extractable leachable. They are also constantly changing their innovative way to make the new single-use technologies.
Right, and you mentioned extractables and leachables there. John, as a regulatory expert, I think you mentioned it briefly earlier, but are there any concerns with quality, with extractable and leachables of single-use systems, or are we beyond that?
No, I don't think that's still a concern. It depends on the product, but generally for biologics, you will need to have, say, at least class 4 plastics and also some extractable leachables data on most of it, especially the downstream plastics. Upstream, maybe less so, because maybe you can show that some of the extractable leachables could be cleared by the columns or other separation steps. But yes, it's still a concern, and sponsors still need to do the experiments.
And sponsors they haven't become complacent at all, have they?
No, I can just speak about my experience around the world. I would say that every time I ask for it as an auditor, the sponsor has an answer. So I think people are doing it. I think they're aware of the extractable leachables issue. Again, particularly for the downstream single-use plastics, and people are doing the experiments that are necessary.
And just on that same subject, for any of the CMOs, are you finding your customers have any concerns about extractables and leachables, or are they perfectly confident with, I guess, your capabilities in ensuring the safety of single-use in commercial manufacturing?
I think most of our partners are satisfied with the extractable leachable data supplied by the manufacturers of the bags and the cassettes for the chromatography skids. Certainly they realize that going forward they'll have to do work to define their profile for extractables and leachables for their particular product. But early phase companies are not concerned about that.
I think it goes back again to the knowledge about your process and how much you know, and be able to demonstrate the robustness of the process, including your experience of commercialization and what factors you need to look into and what you need to really determine that demonstrate to the authorities that you have clearance or the levels of it. So it's all part of the same package, and it's all about applying the experience and the knowledge to its leachable, extractable, and maybe other things, but it's the principle. Following that principle is important.
The vendors have done extensive characterization work for their films, and that's really what drove a lot of those vendors to move to updated films for their bags. From the CDMO side, we work with our sponsors, the drug sponsor, to do a risk assessment of their process to identify where they're maybe most exposed, and then the drug sponsor will typically do some amount of testing in those areas.
This is the BPI Theater, so this is an interactive session. I have a couple more question or topic areas I'd like to discuss, but I'm conscious of the time. So if anyone has a question for our panel on any of the subjects we've spoken about so far, or any specifics they want to know on this subject, then now is your time to raise your hand, and we'll get the mic to you. No one? Well, okay. Well, look, if there is any questions that come up, then raise your hand and I'll try and keep an eye out. But if not, we're going to move on to emerging markets. And I think Jay alluded to this before. I guess I'm thinking China specifically because the amount of investment in CMOs and capacity in China of late has all focused on single use. When we look at emerging markets, when we're looking at China, how important is single use to grow a manufacturing industry in these regions? I mean, Jay, if you want to start this off.
Yeah, I think as I mentioned before, the single use allow emerging market to get into the biologics much faster and with a low initial cost capital investment. That's actually is very important for the emerging market to get the initiative and then expanding it. So I think in China especially, I think a majority of the big CDMOs or big farmers all start to have their own single-use site based at China. Just for the one reason is because the patient population is huge in that region. But I'm sure the demand is the same as Africa or some other regions, emerging regions. I think it's single use will be able to enable them to move much faster too. Again, this is our perspective, so we hope to help in that move to get the drugs to all the global patients.
Shiva, obviously Lonza, you mentioned before, has made its first moves into China, and it's fully single use. Why is single use so attractive to Chinese manufacturing?
Yeah, again, for the same reasons as the rest of the market interested. Again, access and getting is the flexibility, is the agility of the system that allowing them to get into clinics and markets as soon as possible. We believe that it plays an important role in the emerging market, allowing them to keep up with the growth, the significant growth that it's seen in those markets. But the important point is that it is still an emerging market. So it is important to work with the vendors, and security of supply and sourcing is really important there, as well as working with the authorities, the Chinese authorities, in order to shape the guidelines for the single use in that environment as well.
And this is are you kind of pointing towards some of the compliance issues that China has seen in the past, and single use, does that mitigate against a lot of the risks we've seen there?
Yes, that's right. It's important to have that, to show that robustness of the supply, the quality of the supply as well. But as I mentioned, working with the regulators is really important because it's still shaping. The regulations are still shaping in that market.
And in the same way as perhaps Lonza saw competition from single use amongst the CDMO space, for the American CMOs here, or CDMOs here, is the advent of single use in countries like China or other emerging markets, is that a growing global threat to your business at all, Stephen?
I think we see it as a possibility for markets. We're confident our U.S. facilities can produce materials. I think our clients have expressed concerns over supply chain for consumables for emerging markets as being a reason why they prefer to manufacture with a U.S. supplier.
So really, it's the supply chain is as critical there, or as much of a concern there as the single use, the manufacturing side as well. Yeah.
Yes, I believe that's the case at the present time. Of course, as more facilities are built in emerging markets, that will change. So.
And Jean, the same question to you. Are you seeing the rise of CMOs in emerging markets as a long-term threat to your business at all?
Yeah, so definitely the introduction of single-use technologies has kind of leveled the playing field as far as equipment and technology across different CDMOs. But where we focus on is the relationship with the client and making sure that we have a good cultural fit, that we have the same goal to get their product to the market safely. So it's more energy put into making sure we leverage our experience and the relationship with the client.
Once again, if there is any questions, this is your final opportunity to ask the panel because we're about to wrap up. Hey, look down there. Can we get a microphone? Sorry. Wow. You can shout if you want that. So that's what happens to the waste. How do you dispose of single-use bioreactor bags? Yeah, who wants to jump in there on the sort of the disposal side of things?
It's generally just disposed as bio waste. Yeah, just general bio waste. Yeah, I mean, I think the manufacturers should answer, but
usually in the manufacturer site, we have decontamination autoclave there, so you can decontaminate it, then treat it as a bio waste and ship it out.
Yeah, I think the issue still is recycling the plastic, so it's straightforward to decontaminate it, but then that bag is going to go into the landfill, so I think that's a challenge for the single-use industry.
Has this been exacerbated by concerns for single-use plastic in general life, whether it's cutlery, straws, or anything like that? Have questions now been raised about the biomanufacturing side of use of plastics?
I think in general you can't recycle it because most of them are multi-layers. That's been my experience.
Well, unless there are any burning questions, I'm going to ask a final question to the panel, and I think we're going to wrap up. So, as I said in the introduction, single-use really has been a hardy perennial of the last decade in industry meetings like this. So, are we still going to be talking about single-use in 10 years' time? Is it still going to be an area of discussion and debate? John?
I think if we're still talking about data integrity, we'll still be talking about single use. No, I think yes, but I think also it's going to mature, and it will just be another way to manufacture. So yes, I think we still will be talking about it, but the volume of the conversation will be significantly reduced, I think, because it will be well accepted by then.
Much like we've moved from the clinic to commercial now.
I think it will. I think it's going that way, more and more companies are using it for commercial, and I think that trend will just continue.
Gene, final thoughts? If it lets you.
Yeah, so we started using single-use bioreactors back in 2007, so about 10 years ago. Back then, it was a very novel concept, but now it's become the norm for the industry. So 10 years from now, I think unless there is some other technology that comes to leverage the capacity that's needed, really, I think the single-use technology is going to be in our future still.
Jay, 2029, what's the situation?
Again, I think the single-use technology will be already have space in today's biomanufacturing. Probably will even more in the 2022. But in another 10, 20 years, no one will know there's might be another new technologies comes out. We certainly, we did not know 20, 30 years ago a single-use technology can this big in the space in the biomanufacturing. Again, I think although we talk about the single-use, and the stainless steel or other things can still hybrid into the systems and to reduce the cost. A lot of things happening in the new technology front line, and we just have to keep an eye on it and move with the wave.
Shiva, Stephen, anything else to add?
I think we hope the industry continues to innovate, and we may be talking about it, but maybe in a different context, in the use of, maybe we didn't talk about continuous manufacture, the use of single use in continuous manufacture, and maybe other type of formats in microbial fermentation, for example. So I think we still all as an industry a lot to do and to progress further.
Yeah, I would agree. It'll be interesting to see how the industry will move to continuous processing and what the role for single-use versus stainless steel will be in continuous production. So.
Well, let's all make a pledge to meet up here in 2029 virtually or face-to-face or whatever and discuss the issues. I'd like to thank everyone for listening to the panel today, and I'd like to thank the panel themselves for stimulating this debate and discussion. And yeah, thanks everyone.